Welcome to 2026. This is our first video, and I'm excited because this video is something that I'm very passionate about. It's a topic that I'm passionate about, and that is the most important numbers that you need to track in your business. I think it's a great start to the year because it will give you as a founder a clear indication of where you should be spending your time. You know, a lot of people say, Jandre, I want to work on my business. But the reality is, to work on the business, you still need to know what happens in the business. Okay. Like, how are you going to know what to fix and what's going well and what's not going well? What's healthy and what's not healthy if you don't know what's happening in the business? And how are you going to fix that by working on the business if you have no idea of what's happening behind the curtains? And I think that is why having a spreadsheet with 4 or 5 fundamental metrics is so important, because it's going to give you a clear idea of whether the business is healthy or not. And that's a really important thing to know as a business owner, trust me. And I think also why I'm nostalgic about this and emotional, excited about this is because it completely changed my life. In 2021, I was deep into the agency, and it was 2020, and I got a mentor in November 2020. And in 2021, I completely changed the way I operate as a founder. And this is one of the biggest things that I've changed. Okay. It's one of the biggest things that I've changed. And it allowed me to put up a system that gives me insight to what's happening in the business without me having to be in it. And it will allow me to work on it and help the team fix those issues. And since then, we've grown so much. I didn't fathom that we will reach the heights that we have from an agency point of view. And then we also have an investment arm of other businesses that we manage. And this is the numbers that I look at, the metrics that we obviously stare at on a weekly basis to make sure that these businesses are moving into the direction that they should. Now, without any further ado, let's just dive into the video. A disclaimer, I think I want to say that these are just my perspectives. And if you like marketing and business content, then this is the channel for you. I would encourage you to like and subscribe if you find the information that I'm about to share valuable, and that will allow you to see more stuff like this from me, Jandre. So that said, let's just dive into the first thing that I think is important, and that is talking about the mistakes that people make when it comes to tracking certain numbers. I think we know why it's important. Let's be honest. Like, as a business owner, if you don't know why it's important to track numbers, then you probably shouldn't, spend time on this video. You should first figure out why it is important to look at numbers if you grow a business. But as a founder, I'd like to assume that most people know they need to track certain metrics in their business. Okay. I mean, if you're not tracking anything, whether it's revenue, whether if you've got an online store, whether it's ad spend and the return on that ad spend, or whether it's your expenses ideally, or whatever it is. Like, if you're not tracking anything, then you're probably not a great business owner, and then you're going to have a tough time building a successful business. So I believe that you already know that you should track numbers. Okay. Let's put that aside. Now the question is, which numbers should we be tracking? And I think the mistake that people make is they track every single number possible, every single metric possible. And that is not ideal, because that's going to give you paralysis analysis, and it's going to create a bunch of anxiety for you that could be so overwhelming that you actually just make stupid decisions and emotional decisions that are clearly not objective. The second thing is, a lot of people don't track anything at all, like I said before, which is going to be tough in building a business, because you are going to have so many blind spots. And those blind spots, because of the ignorance that you have, will also create anxiety. And then some people just track the wrong numbers at the end of the day. And that is also not a good thing, because if you track the wrong numbers, you should know that every number or metric tells a story. And if you don't get an accurate interpretation of the story, then you're going to make wrong decisions. And that's going to make you anxious as well, because the things you're doing is not going to work, and you're going to not know how to fix them. So I actually believe that tracking your business through these types of metrics can help reduce a lot of anxiety for you. And I think a lot of founders actually ignore tracking the metrics because they don't want to get anxious. They actually want to be ignorant. Today we can pay our bills, so that's good enough. But that's really not how to build a business. You have to get proactive with where you're going. And to do that, you need to look at numbers. And if those numbers are going to make you anxious for some reason, then actually it's a good thing, because now you know what to fix. And hopefully you know how to fix it if you have the skills. And that's obviously why channels like this exist at the end of the day as well. So these are the mistakes that people make. They either track nothing, they track too much, or they track the wrong numbers. And in today's video, we're going to talk about what are the correct metrics or numbers that you should be looking at for the business in order to understand whether the business is actually healthy or not. Because that's the goal. That's the reason we're tracking numbers, is everything aligned to helping us achieve our goal. And that is the reason these metrics are going to be the fundamental pillars of your tracking sheet, or whatever you call it. So at the end of the day, the goal of tracking numbers would be to track as few numbers as possible, so that we just focus on 4 or 5 things. So we don't want to track too much, but at the same time, those numbers need to give us the most accurate interpretation of the health of the business. Okay, because then that will allow us to decide where to put our energy and focus in order to fix things and move them in the right direction. And this is what we call KPIs. Okay, when I say numbers and when I say metrics, the actual fancy word for it is KPIs. KPIs. So Jandre, what does KPI stand for? Well, I'm glad you asked, because KPIs stand for key performance indicators. The emphasis are on key and performance. I say key because that means they are important. And then emphasis on performance. And the performance will give us an indication of whether the business is performing, overperforming, or underperforming in correlation to the goal that we want to track for ourselves. Really simple as that. Now, here's just some fun facts and some nuances that we can address. I think as the business grows, the things you track might change too, depending on the roles and the responsibilities that you adapt. However, there are 4 metrics I think that are non-negotiable that you as a founder will track always, 4 or 5 of them, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. The other nuance is that different people in your company will be tracking different KPIs. And the reason for that is because different people have different roles and those roles have different goals. And you want to ensure that they track key performance indicators that are contextual to the goals that they need to achieve. It's like a rugby team. Everybody has to work together in order to win the match, but everybody has different roles. Not everybody is going to kick the ball. Not everybody is going to throw the ball into a line out. Not everybody is going to be scrum half. Everybody has different roles and you need to exceed in those roles and achieve those goals if we want to move the business forward. So different people in the company will essentially track different KPIs. And you will be able to monitor them in order to understand if those people are meeting the objectives the company needs to meet in order to move forward. And if they're not, then you as the founder can sit with those people and figure out, how you can help them achieve those goals, or whether it's an actual, another issue at play, which might just be a human issue. Maybe they're just not the best fit for that role. However, these are the conclusions that you will get to when you actually track things. And I think when I started, I didn't really have these things in place. So I never really knew if it was a human issue or it was a business issue or it was a resource issue, whatever it was. And I think by having some form of measurability, you gain clarity on where the issues lie. And you as a founder can then objectively go and try and fix those issues so the business can move forward. Now, another thing we need to keep in mind when it comes to KPIs is that KPIs are not the big goals that you're trying to achieve for the business. Just use an example of someone who wants to run a half marathon. That's 21 kilometers that you have to run. The goal is to run 21 kilometers. But the key performance indicators that you're going to track are not whether you ran 21 kilometers prior to the race and see that as an indication of whether you're fit enough or not. Okay. You would assume so, but a smart way to go about it is to break up all the little tasks that you have to do in order to achieve the fitness level of someone who can run a 21K. And then ask yourself, how can I measure those tasks and understand of whether I am actually completing them in an efficient way in order to ensure that I gain the fitness needed in the specific time needed to run the marathon. Okay. So you're most likely going to start off by saying, this is for someone who probably never ran in their life and are probably very unfit. You can say, I want to run 3 kilometers or 2 kilometers 3 days a week to start. Okay. And that is where you would start. So initially your KPIs, key numbers that you want to track, is whether you ran 2 to 3 kilometers 2 or 3 times a week. If you've done that, then you know that you're on track to get fitter. Okay. And then another KPI would be how quickly you actually running, those 2 to 3 kilometers. What is the actual time it takes for you to complete that? Because ideally you want that to get less and less, because that'll be an indication that you're getting fitter and fitter. So those are just 2 examples. You're going to set small little measurable tasks. And if you get all of them right, you will eventually be able to run a 21K half a marathon. Now, the last thing I want to say on KPIs is that ideally the tasks that we pick, that we want to track and measure, needs to be tasks that are quite objective in a way, to measure the efficiency of it. Let's use this as an example. If I said to someone, hey, go take out the trash, and I want to measure if they did it effectively, I need to ask myself, what are the objective things that we need to look at whether someone competently and effectively taken out the trash? Well, the first thing is the black bag still in the dustbin, or is it now gone? That's the first thing. The second thing is there maybe a new black bag, in the place of the old black bag? Because that's one of the worst pet peeves is when someone takes out the trash, you come back and there's no black bag in it. So as a completed task, we would want to assume that a new black bag has been put into the actual dustbin. We want to also then see if there's any messy rubbish around the dustbin, that some of it drop off, because then, they didn't do it effectively because there's still a bit of rubbish left that they might have missed or might have dropped. So those are just 3 examples, right? Is the black bag still in the dustbin? No, it's objectively gone. Great. Is there a new black bag in the dustbin that is empty? Yes. Great. Beautiful. And is it clean and tidy around the dustbin and the trail to, outside? Yes. All right. Well, then objectively, someone completed the task effectively. And that is how you can build KPIs for yourself in your business, is you want to make it as objective as possible. And that's why the numbers I'm about to share with you, they cannot be but objective. That's what I like about these key performance indicators, is that they are very objective and telling you how the business is doing health-wise, and they're not subjective. But the bottom line here in the lesson is, if you are going to create KPIs for your team, or for people in the business, or for suppliers that you work with, contractors, ideally those KPIs need to be measured in an objective way. Otherwise, it's going to be like, yeah, but you said this and you didn't tell me to do it that way. That is why I like numbers, because numbers don't lie. It's black and white at the end of the day. All right, so without any further ado, let's just dive straight into the first metric that I think is important to track for most businesses, or any business really. And it's quite a given, okay? And I think most people track this, but I think this is the only thing they track and nothing else. And that is cash collected, or revenue, if you will. Now, there's a difference between revenue and cash collected sometimes, because sometimes people invoice and expect revenue to come in, but that revenue hasn't come in a specific 30-day time frame, which is called the month. And that cash only gets collected in the next month, and that affects your balance sheet and your profitability for that month, etc. So I like cash collected. What is the actual cash collected for that month? You know, if we run the agency, we say we have projections, and then according to that projections, we have cash collected. We projected we're going to do this much. How much cash will we actually collect in accordance to that? And ideally, we want that gap to be as small as possible. Okay, so cash collected, and is that growing every month? You know, is that something that is, you know, growing by 10% or 20%, whatever the actual rate is that you want to grow at? Because in the ideal world, you would want to assume that if you're going to do more revenue, you're going to do more profit. It's not always the case, though. Very few businesses get that right. Trust me. Sometimes people grow in revenue, but they actually decrease in profit, and that happens, you know, quite often from what we've seen, considering we've worked with over 500-600 companies now in the agency. So that is just the first but very important metric, is cash collected. The second one is profit before tax, and this branches off into two metrics actually, because profit before tax, that just means all the cash that you've collected minus the expenses, all the expenses in the business, and right before you have to pay tax, what did you actually have left? Okay, that is what we call your PBT, profit before tax. And there's two numbers, there's two metrics there. The one is the total profit before tax, meaning the actual rand value that's left, that's tangible, that you can reinvest back into growth next month. And the reason you want to track that specifically, like the total number of it, is because you want to know, if you made 100,000 Rand profit this month and it's visibly in the bank, then why can you not increase your ad spend or your marketing spend by 30,000 Rand, hoping to make more profit next month, right? That's kind of the logic behind it. It's like, how much cash do we actually collect, and how much of that is now actual profit that we can actually spend and reinvest back into the business? And the second metric under that, okay, so you've got profit before tax, and then the first metric is the total Rand value of profit before tax. And the second metric is profit before tax percentage, okay? Meaning, what percentage of the revenue that you collected, the cash that you collected, was actually profit. Now, a lot of people would say, well, why is that important? Well, that is important because it gives you an indication of how healthy the business actually is as a profitable organization, right? So a lot of businesses, you know, they only track cash collected and the total profit made. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you also want to track the percentage, like what percentage of your revenue or cash collected is actually profit. And the reason you want to do that is because it gives you an indication of how healthy your business is. If you, for example, have a 5% profit before tax percentage, what the business is actually saying to you is that this business is quite fragile. And if there's something that happens that is out of our control, and, you know, we make an error from an operational side and we overspend on something, then we're technically spending all our profit. You know, we this close. We 5% from not making a profit. That's basically what it's saying, is that, listen, your business is only 5% healthy, ideally. And the percentage value, I think, is something that a lot of people want to track, you know, because it doesn't make sense to them. But the reality is, it helps you understand what the actual ratio is between cash and profit, and how healthy the business is, you know, really at the end of the day. So most businesses run between, I'd say, 7 and 12% profit before tax in South Africa, you know, the ones that are profitable. But you ideally want to aim for 15 to 20%. That becomes a healthy business. A healthy business is considered a business that 20% of the cash collected is actually profit that you can reinvest back into growth. That's left before paying your tax. So if you want to build a top 1% business, you know, you're either going to have to do 20 million a year or more, or you're going to have to find a way to get to 20 to 25% profitability. And if you can do both, then you're going to have a very healthy business, because then at 20 million a year, you know, let's say hypothetically that's close to 2 million a month, you know, you're making at 20%, 400,000 Rand a month profit. But if you only had 5% profit, that becomes 50,000 Rand, which is not ideal. It's not ideal. So if you were running at a 5% profit before tax, then in essence, you know, on 2 million a month, 10% would be 200 and 5% would be 100,000. That's 4 times less. You know what I'm saying? So this is why those things are important at the end of the day, is to track both the Rand value and the percentage. Right, so metric number 3 is your CAC. And I'm not saying poo. What I am saying is CAC, which stands for cost of acquiring a customer. Okay, that is really what it means. And guys, I can't think of a business, there's no business in the world that doesn't need clients or customers. Okay, that is what a business is. You are doing something in exchange for money, and usually the people on the other side are clients or customers. So that said, CAC is just what it's costing you to get that client or a customer to give give you money? How much money did you have to invest as a total whole to get someone to give you money in exchange for the service that you want to offer? So in a nutshell, you want that number to be as small as possible, but it is nuanced based on industries, based on markets, based on how well you position yourself in the market, how good your offer is, how good your quality of the service or product is. All those things play a role in affecting your cost of acquisition. But the reason you want to know cost of acquisition, whether it's $50 or $500 or $1,000 or 10,000 Rand, it's understanding that, hey, are we paying a fair price for acquiring customers? And then is there actually profit, once someone has paid us? And that's what LTV is about. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So we're going to park LTV and just focus on CAC for a second. You want to know what you're paying to acquire a customer, because if it is profitable, then you can put more money into marketing. You can hire more resources to help you acquire more clients or more customers. And that is how you scale. That is how you grow a business. You find new customers and you have existing customers come back. Those are literally the only two ways to build a business. There's no other two ways. So, you can say, find new people, keep them as long as you can, and have them give you more money over a period of time. But ideally, there's only two ways: is find new customers and keep them. That's really as simple as that. So that is what CAC kind of indicates, is what is it actually costing you? And you want that to be as profitable as possible, okay, in accordance to the next metric, which is LTV, the lifetime value of the client or the customer, all right? That is a very crucial metric, and very few businesses track this metric. Very, very few. Every single e-commerce business, every single company that does lead generation or that offers a service, even agency owners, when I speak to them, they don't know what their LTV is per client or per customer. They don't know. And what boggles me then is like, okay, cool, but how are you scaling? How do you know that you're scaling profitably? Are you just putting money into Meta and Google and hoping for the best? Because then you can be a bit more strategic. When you track these metrics, you can make better decisions. And I think that's the difference, actually, that's helped us grow. Well, since we've tracked these numbers, we had more clarity on whether we're doing something right. And if you're doing something right and the numbers back it up, then do more of it as quickly as you can. That's how you grow quicker. Simple as that. Not always as easy, but that's not the world we live in. Simplicity and difficulty are not connected, okay? Something can be simple, but it can still be hard. And once you track these numbers, building a business becomes simple. I'm not saying it gets easier, just saying it gets simpler. And I think that's why most businesses are overwhelmed, because business is overcomplicated for them. And it's your job to find a way to simplify it for yourself. And that is what this sheet will do for you. So guys, LTV, it just stands for the lifetime value of the person that's giving you money, okay? If someone had to give you 1,000 Rand today, that lifetime value, and never again, their lifetime value will be $1,000. If they had to give you 1,000 Rand today and 2,000 Rand 3 months from now, and never again, the lifetime value will be 1,000 plus 2,000, which is $3,000, okay? So you want to know what the LTV is, and then you want to know what the actual cost of acquiring the customer is, and that will give you gross profit on the actual customer or the client. You see, there's COGS and cost of services that we can include here, so I'm oversimplifying it, but the point is, you can see what it's costing you to get a client or a customer, and you can see what you get back. And ideally, what you get back is a lot more than what you're spending to acquire them. And that is how businesses grow faster, is they keep the CAC as small as possible and the return from the client or the customer as high as possible. Then they make the most amount of profit, and then you can take that profit and reinvest it and to go and find the next customer at a quicker level. So if you have an e-commerce business, the formulation I'm going to share with you is really the formula that you can use in order to calculate your LTV from an e-commerce point of view for your online store. Now, the metric that you want to look at first is orders, total orders over a period of time. And I say period of time because, you need to decide what LTV you're going to measure. Is it the LTV over 6 months, over 12 months, over 24 months? So a hypothetical example will be, let's measure the LTV over 24 months. So what you're going to do is you're going to Shopify or wherever, and you're going to go to your dashboard and you're going to say last 24 months. You're going to pick those dates and you're going to look at this metric. The first metric is total orders. Okay, you write that down. Then the second metric that you want during that time frame is total customers. Okay, and then the third metric you want is average order value for that time frame. Now, circling back to customers, a little nuance is that a customer is someone who's given you money. Shopify reports customers as someone who's got an email and a contact number but has given you zero money. It's just someone who left an email but never really bought. So you want to make sure that if you're on Shopify or any other tool, that a customer is defined as someone who's actually given you money. So you've got total orders, you divide that by total customers, right? So hypothetically, I've got some numbers in front of me just to make this simple for us. Let's say you've got 10,000 orders and you've got 7,500 customers. If you have to divide 10,000 by 7,500, you've got 1.3. Now, let's say your average order value is $650. Then you time the 1.3 by $650. And what is the total? It's going to be 845 Rand. All right. So that now is your LTV over 24 months. That means if you spend money to acquire a customer, there's a good chance that customer will give you 845 Rand. Okay. So that is what LTV means. All right. Now, when it comes to a service business like us at V8, we're an agency, we're a service business. The formula is a little bit different because you don't have orders and you don't have like an average order value type thing. You've got something else. So the first thing you need to understand is the first metric you need to calculate this, and I've got the notes in front of me, is money made from clients. What is the total of money made from clients over a specific time frame. Okay, so let's say for 2025, the revenue that you've made from all your clients is R1 million. Okay, you want to divide that by the average total of clients per month. So what I mean by that is that every month, hopefully you sign clients. If not, there's obviously a percentage of clients that leave, and we're going to talk about churn rate. That's what that is. But you want to look at the average total clients per month. So let's say in January you had 4, in February you had 5 or 6 total, and then 8. You count all of that. You add it up. Okay. So if in February you had 4, you plus March, you plus the total for April, you plus the total for May, you plus the total for June. So you do Jan till December, and then you get with the total, and then you divide that total by 12. Then you will have average total clients per month. Okay. So you take the total cash collected basically for that year, aka all the money that you made from the clients, as I said earlier, and you divide that by the average total clients per month, and then you time that by 1 divided by your churn rate. Now, a churn rate, guys, is the percentage of clients that you lose in correlation to the total of clients that you have. So if you have 10 clients and you lost 1, then your churn rate is 10%. If you've got 100 clients and you lose 10, your churn rate is 10%. Okay, simple as that. So you calculate your churn rate. So you go, what is the total clients that I had this year? What is the total clients that I lost? My churn rate is X. Okay, so most agencies run on 10%. So I'm just going to use that. Luckily, we're not close to that, which is good. We're a little bit lower, which is great for us. Thank you. But let's say it's 10% like an average agency. Then you take the following. You do total cash collected. Let's say that's $1 million. You divide that by your total average clients. Let's say that's 100. You now have 10,000 Rand. Okay, that means the average client gave you 10,000 Rand. And then you times that by 1 divided by your churn rate. So if it's 1 divided by 10, it becomes 10, okay? By 10%, sorry. If it's 1 divided by 10%, that becomes 10. And essentially your LTV then becomes 10,000 times 10, which becomes 100,000 Rand LTV. That means that the average client in your business gives you 100,000 Rand. So now the question is, how much do you pay to get a client? And this includes your marketing spend. This includes anything that you're spending on acquiring a customer, sales representative, software tools that helps you, like a CRM, whatever. And then you can go, cool, this is actually my total CAC. It is the total money I've spent divided by the total clients I've signed, and that becomes your CAC. So number 3 and 4 goes together in my opinion. So cost of acquisition is basically just the total amount of clients or customers in correlation to the amount of money that you've spent. So if you spend 50,000 Rand on marketing and you got 50 clients, then technically your CAC is 1,000 because it's 50,000 divided by 50. Okay. Now, if your CAC and LTV is very far apart, meaning CAC is 1,000 and LTV is 10,000, then you've got a ratio of 10. CAC to LTV is 1 to 10, and you want that ratio to be as high as possible. That means your business will be more profitable, okay? And the more profitable it is, the more you can reinvest back into growth. All right, for the sake of time, I'm moving on to the last metric, which is what we call profit on ad spend, okay? So a lot of people focus on ROAS, and I think that's important, and I think everybody has to have an understanding of what that is. But I just went with POAS, which is profit on ad spend, which is a metric that you can track yourself based on the profit that you've made divided by the actual money that you've spent on marketing, okay? ROAS is important because it tells you how much you're getting back in terms of money, based on advertising. So if you're spending 50,000 and you're getting 100,000 back, your ROAS is 2. But the reason I'm not overly excited about it is because it doesn't give me a true indication of how much profit I'm making on the back of that so that I can reinvest back into growth. I can't reinvest revenue back into growth because revenue, I'm going to have to pay the cost of the product. I'm going to have to pay more shipping. I'm going to probably have to hire more staff, whatever it is. Probably have to spend more on marketing. But if I know what my profit is, then I have a clearer indication of how much of that revenue is actually profit, which means how much I can actually spend to hire more staff, how much I can actually spend in order to increase my marketing budget. So POAS, guys, is basically just the total amount of profit. So if the total profit is 100,000 Rand and your cost of marketing was 10,000 Rand, then your POAS is 10, okay? That's massive, obviously, and unheard of. So more realistic ROAS would be 50 cents to 2 to 3 Rand, maybe 2 Rand, 3 Rand on the marketing spend. That means that for every single cent you spend on marketing, you make 30 cent back, you make 50 cent back, you make 1 Rand back, you make 2 Rand back. And if you can get to a point where you're spending 1 Rand and you're making 1 Rand profit, geez, just keep growing. Just keep whatever you're doing up until now. Just do more of that and see if it helps. That's the first thing that you want to do, right? If something is working, just do more of it. And those are the metrics that I track as a business owner for everything. I track cash collected for the business. I track PBT, profit before tax, the total amount in rands, as well as the percentage. That gives me an indication of how healthy the business is. And if the business is not healthy, then we need to look deeper into what we can fix. And then it's a situation of tracking CAC and LTV together in correlation to each other. That becomes, a ratio. So I've got CAC, for example, that's $1,000. I've got LTV, that's 10,000. I know my CAC ratio to LTV ratio is 1 to 10. That means we actually have a healthy business and we can keep scaling and doing what we're doing. And then the last metric is POAS, which means the actual profit back on the marketing that we actually are spending. And once you get those metrics and you just track them religiously, I promise you life will get a little bit easier. In the second series of this topic, or the second video of this topic, I can maybe unpack, what to look for if these metrics don't make sense. And we'll start unpacking that one video at a time. So I hope there was value in this video for you. If you like content like this, then like and subscribe. Let me know, drop a comment, and happily answer it for you if you've got any questions. Much love. Cheers.